from this investigative work. Part of this work is the open source investigation. Bellingcat is an organization that uses open source information to investigate a range of topics for a range of purposes. Oh, thanks to the microphone. Hello? Okay. Yeah, so we use open source investigation, and I'm going to take you through what that actually means and how we use it in different situations. So we kind of broke down the process to three very basic steps. We first of all, we identify information, we verify it, and then we amplify it, and hope the screen stays on. So I'll give you some examples of this. So this is something we call geolocation, which is the main step in the verification process. What we do is we use visual information that's available to confirm where things are filmed. And this is an example of a barrel bomb used in Syria. Now, to most people, that just looks like a bin beam. It doesn't really look like much. And this was part of an investigation where we tried to establish whether or not these were being used, because we had posts like this, where we had claims from, articles in places like Russia Today saying barrel bomb baloney, this isn't happening, this isn't true. So we looked through information that was coming from Syria, looking for the information relating to this. So, for example, we found a video like this where we can actually see a barrel bomb being thrown out the rear of a helicopter. And eventually we came across this video where we can actually see it filmed inside a helicopter as the barrel bomb is thrown out the rear. The thing is, when you have these videos shared online from various groups on the ground, people are inclined to disbelieve them. How do you know this is filmed in Syria? How do you know this is another conflict zone? Well, what we actually have here is enough information to verify where this was filmed, because we can use satellite imagery on Google Earth and zoom into the same town, just searching through a lot of satellite imagery, and we can do a comparison of the two locations where we can overlay the image and show that it's the same location. So we're able to confirm where that video was filmed, where they were dropping that barrel bomb. So that's a very basic example of geolocation and one of the ways we verify videos. I don't know if it helps, I can use a VGA source. Yeah, shall I use a VGA source? Oh, yes, it is. Okay, so this is the microphone. This is another example of geolocation. This was actually an ISIS social media campaign that encouraged their followers to take photographs of themselves holding pieces of paper from various towns and cities in Europe. The idea was to instill fear into the European population, to say there's ISIS supporters everywhere. This backfired because it was possible to find where some of these were actually taken. And the media narrative changed from ISIS are everywhere to ISIS are really who they are. So this first one here, that you will never be able to do like, that's just a bunch of leaves. That is not very scary either. This one is inside a shop, so it's very unlikely you'll be able to find that. It's a blurry background. You'd have to be in that shop on that day with an image you can find. But this one, we can find the exact location of. So what we start doing is we look at kind of the big information there, the stuff that we can use to narrow down the exact location. And in this case, the big information is this advertising poll. Because this is taken in Germany and Munster. As we know, Germans are very organized, and they in fact have a website with their advertising locations listed. So we can actually search for advertising polls, and it gives us this handy map showing all the different locations. And then we can actually go to those locations in this map in the website, and it has this very useful aerial imagery. So a fairly traditional way of geolocation is using this satellite imagery and comparing it to objects visible in a photograph. So we can start doing that here. The camera position is on the top right, looking to the bottom left. And you can see the pole here quite clearly and obviously. But behind that, we can see the metal bars that are visible here. We can see the stripes on the road. We can actually see that they're dotted lines in a fixed solid line in the correct position. We can see the traffic lights behind it and another site over here, as well as lots of other details that are available in this image. And again, this is another basic example of geolocation where we just look at what's available in the aerial imagery and compare it to the satellite image. Now, this is an example we've done. We've been working with the International Criminal Court, advising them on the use of open source information. And recently they issued their first arrest warrant based off open sources, based off social media posts on Facebook, 7 executions posted by a group fighting in Libya. And this is one of the videos that we examined, just because we want to know exactly where it was filmed. So this is the video in question. It was the 7th video in the sequence where they've lined up a number of men they're about to execute. What we first do is take the video and we take separate frames from the video that show slightly different angles because it's filmed from the same location. So we can merge this into one large image. So this actually helps us when we're looking through this stuff rather than having to scan back and forth from the video. So what we're able to see are the buildings that are just visible in the background and a wall and a forking road. And that doesn't seem like much to begin with. But what we can start doing is looking at their social media account that this was posted on, because they posted lots of footage and videos of them fighting in an area called the Chinese Building Area, which is a specific area in Benghazi where they operate. So we started looking there. We noticed there was a similarity between the buildings we could see in the background and these buildings. So this is where we began our search. It's a very large area. And there's not many open spaces, which was helpful because we knew we were looking for an open space. And eventually we came across one that had some of the characteristics we were looking for. So what we were able to do is we could see that the buildings were in the area. We could also see the wall and the fork in the road, but that wasn't enough to say this is the correct location. What we did then is we, inside Google Earth, we can go to the ground level, the exact same camera position, recreate it in Google Earth, and overlay the video with the camera position. And we can see the bushes and other details match the same location. What made us sure is that on July 17th, there's a satellite image and these objects appear. And what these actual objects are the bloodstains from the execution in exactly the same positions. So we're able to say categorically, this is the location where these executions took place. We also can find out other information from this. Because we have the precise camera location, we can also use other details. So you can see everyone's got shadows being cast, and these shadows can be used to calculate the exact time of day these executions actually took place. So based on this, we can say the exact time of day, and then we look at satellite imagery from before and after these marks appeared on the ground, the bloodstains, and that gives us an idea of the time frame. And these videos were posted online in the afternoon of July 17th, and they're claimed that happened on July 17th. So we can say that is a consistent timeline with the information available. This is interesting, useful when organisations like the IC are building a case, because they need every single detail you can get from these videos, and there's an awful lot you can find there. In another example, the Europol started a campaign called Tracing Object, Stop Child Abuse Tracing Object. And in that campaign, what they did is they took images they'd cut out from child abuse imagery, and they asked the public if they could verify exactly where these what these objects are, because these are images from across the world, but they didn't know where they were in the world. So by asking, basically crowdsourcing the answer through communities on Reddit, for example, Twitter, Fannycat also was involved with this. It was possible to find people who recognise these objects and ID what these objects were. One of the most interesting examples is this image of a hotel room, and this could be any hotel anywhere in the world. They didn't know. All we had was the photograph, and one businessman had visited the same hotel in Mauritius and was able to say this is the hotel, and the right-hand image is from the website of the hotel. The real difference is the bed sheets have been changed since then. But that would allow the police then to contact that hotel, look at the guest list, look at the dates, ask them when they changed the code of the bed sheets. So this is another example of how this is now being used through crowdsourcing to establish all kinds of information. You'll probably remember the Charlottesville White Nationalist March. There's this photograph very well known showing a group of men attacking someone, and we wanted to find out if we could figure out who this person was. What we did is we searched through every single photograph and video that was taken on that day that was publicly available, until we found someone with very similar clothing. We could also see he was wearing this white helmet, and we could also see the marks on the helmet in similar positions. So the thing is, because those are stickers and he's written on it and all that stuff, this is a very high probability this is the same person, but it doesn't tell us who this person is. So we start trying to find some other information, and we found this photograph from the night before, the notorious Tiki Torch rally, where we found him, and we could confirm it was the same person because of the birthmarks and moles on his neck. Once we established it was the same person, it still hadn't told us who he was. We could also compare details like the ear shape. We could see he was wearing the same kind of chain as well. So we're confident it was the same person, but who is he? Well, we didn't know who he was. So we started looking at the people around him, because we kind of assumed if you go to a white nationalist rally, you might want to bring some of your white nationalist friends. So some of these people had already been ID'd. So another account had already ID'd these people. So often when you're doing this work, you shouldn't just think, okay, I'm doing this on my own. You should see what other people are doing. But sometimes you find they've done all the work for you. And in this case, they have, because they identified this guy, Jacob Dix, and he was identifiable by using his Facebook photograph. That's again to do a comparison of his face. This guy, fortunately, had some very clear neck tattoos, which helped a great deal. Now, we want to see who their friends were. Unfortunately, Ryan had his private friends list, so we couldn't see who his friends were. But Jacob had a public one, and he was friends with Ryan. So even though Ryan had made his friends list private, because his friends hadn't, we could find out who his friends were. So we looked at Jacob's list and searched through looking for likely suspects, and we found this guy. And here we can look at his friends list, and we can see he's friends with Jacob, and he's friends with Ryan. So we now have this little community of friends. And we're able to find, again, photographs on his social media profile of him looking very smug with various molds and the same chain again. So we now have his identity. We know who he is. So we know he's Daniel Borden, and this is what he looked like before, and this is what he looks like now, awaiting trial for attacking that guy. So we can use this to identify individuals. The police are doing this more and more. We've been heavily involved with the MH17 investigation, and the police have used a lot of open source investigation material with that. We can also look at conflict. In September 2015, Russia started bombing Syria. And at first they were claiming they were bombing ISIS. And a lot of people claimed they weren't actually bombing ISIS, they were bombing other targets. So the foreign minister said, do not listen to the Pentagon about Russian airstrikes, ask the Russian Ministry of Defense. And in a way, that's what we did. The Russian Ministry of Defense early on in the conflict started posting lots of videos and photographs showing their airstrikes. These are videos from the Russian Ministry of Defense's own YouTube channel. And they posted a lot of these videos. Now, if you cast your mind back to 5 minutes ago when I was talking about the barrel bombs and the way we could find the location by looking at Google Earth imagery, we did exactly the same thing here. In fact, we had a community of people online who kind of made it their hobby to find all these videos, to geolocate them all. So we could draw from that and turn it into a database where we could say where these videos are filmed, where Russia is claiming they're filming, and what the target is. And we discovered that out of the 30 videos Russia posted online in the first few weeks claiming to be ISIS targets, only one of them was actually filmed in ISIS territory. Now, how can we be sure of that? Well, it's actually based off the Russians' own map, because they published a map online showing the territorial control in Syria according to Russia. And we took that map and we overlaid it with Syria and removed it, which the PGA hasn't done us any favors, but here is the area controlled by ISIS. This is non-ISIS, this is the kind of northern Kurdish areas. And these are, this is according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. So I'll give you an example of what we could do. This is one of the examples of the airstrike video. And we could geolocate this as we did with the other videos and can zoom into the location. So it's straight away you can see it's going past the ISIS areas in the east to this location. And this was described as an ISIS facility by the Russian Ministry of Defense. And in fact, what this is a bakery run by the charity the IHH. And we're able to verify that with various sources. This is just one of many examples where Russia claimed they were bombing something and it turned out to be something else. We saw this with water treatment plants, bakeries, grain silos, all kinds of things. Another denial they made was that they do not use cluster bombs, because there were multiple accusations from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International that Russia was using cluster bombs. So they put out a statement saying they do not use them and there are no such munitions at Russia's base in Syria. So what we did this time is we looked through all the photographs and videos published online and elsewhere by the Russian media, Russia Today, Sputnik, Russia One, and we came across photographs like this. What you can see in the corner here, apart from the guy sleeping under the wing, are RBK 500 AO 2.5 RTM cluster bombs at Russia's airbase in Syria. We also found photographs of aircraft, Russian aircraft mounted with them taken off from the airbase. The end of the siege of Aleppo, Russian forces went in and started clearing and exploding munitions. They collected them together and they put them in large trenches to be destroyed. And it just happened some of the munitions they found, you can see at the bottom of the frame, are the same kind of cluster munitions they denied having at their airbase in Syria. So this is all from Russian media, this is all from Russian Ministry of Defense sources. None of this is from local opposition groups or anything like this. I'll show you this example now, hopefully the audio is working. And it's not unfortunately working. So what I'm going to do, unfortunately there's subtitles. So just imagine there's noise. There's that. So Russia published satellite imagery. They claim to show that this is actually happening. And Russia Today reported on this and provided the details.
It was recently alleged that Russian jets destroyed a hospital in the city of Sami, causing the Russian Defense Ministry to well, call on journalists to double-check the stories they publish.
I call on the respected mass media not to jeopardize their reputation by publishing fakes like this.
But it's not just the media. The accusations are actually picked up by the US State Department. And to prove the hospital is totally intact, the Russian Defense Ministry provided up-to-date satellite photographs.
The building on this image, dated October 31st, does not look like it was recently bombed. How can we tell if it's the hospital in Sarmin? A year ago, a video was posted on YouTube that shows the hospital under construction. Here's a screenshot from that year-old video. And here is the Russian Defense Ministry's aerial image of what it says is the hospital. We see a similar dome-shaped structure next to the building on both images. We see a wall or a fence positioned in a similar way. So where exactly is the hospital that Russia is accused of hitting?
So one of the first things we did is we actually checked that location claim to be. So we had to take that image and overlay it with satellite imagery from Google Earth of the location in question. Next, we start taking the videos and geolocating them. So on the left-hand side, you can see the white helmets footage. The hospital buildings to the left-hand side. It was in fact they were talking about the school being bombed initially. And we can see the camera angle is pointing north. We can see the screen spot where the explosion occurred. Now, what's very important are some of the structures in the background. We can see this structure here. This is this small building here. It has a very regular shape. You can see it's a square building in the satellite imagery. We can see these poles in the background. They're casting 4 shadows. And we can see these poles here. You can also see a wall behind it, again, casting a very regular shape. Let's just watch the video again to see where the actual impact happened. So these are the poles that were in the other image. That's the wall, and the basically the explosion happens just to the left-hand side of the wall. So after the second airstrike, another caravan went there and started taking images. Now, what you can now see is, again, it's pointing north, but this time that building has been completely destroyed. So the right-hand side is Google Earth imagery from before the attack occurred, and you expect to see the building completely destroyed. You really see that regular shadow. You can also see the two of the poles have been knocked down in the explosion, and the wall has also been completely destroyed. So let's take a look at the Russian image. We can see the building is still standing. We can see the four poles are still casting shadows, and we can see the wall is still standing. What they did is they took imagery from before the attack occurred and used it as evidence of what happened after the attack. In fact, we can actually look at, I deleted it, never mind. There's a really good slide, I promise you. So a case study we looked at was another bombing, this time in Al-Jinn Mosque in Syria, where initially the White Helmets were reporting some of the details of this, and they said the mosque had been bombed. It was just before the evening prayer. It was full of civilians. There was a prayer meeting going on, and there were many killed and injured. The thing that made this really remarkable is this piece of debris that was pulled out of the building. This is from a US Hellfire missile, and this turned out to be a US airstrike on this building. And it was surprising because generally the Americans had been blowing up mosques in Syria. Russia had more of a track record for that. So this was big news that the Americans had killed a mosque, destroyed a mosque full of civilians. But the Americans put out a statement, and they said they conducted an airstrike on an Al-Qaeda in Syria meeting location, killing several terrorists. But that was not the story that was coming from the ground. With videos, photographs, witnesses, a huge amount of information, just talking about civilians. We started reaching out to people on the ground. We asked them about these claims, and they said they had no idea what they were talking about Al-Qaeda. But America was accused of bombing a mosque, so they responded with this image. And this is actually the location after it's been attacked. You can see obviously a massive amount of damage to the building on the right-hand side. And they said that the military officials believe dozens of Al-Qaeda terrorist leaders have been killed. So we've gone from several terrorists to dozens of terrorist leaders. And in fact, this was the mosque, completely undamaged from the side of the picture. But this was not true. It was a mosque, but this other building was also a mosque that had been constructed in the last few years. And we were able to establish that because we used all the open source information coming from the ground. We worked with Human Rights Watch, who reached out to various witnesses, who gave them lots of details. We were provided additional content. And thanks to that, we worked with forensic architecture at Goldsmiths University, who produced the following video that showed us what we could learn from all this evidence.
On March 16, 2017, at around 6:55 p.m., a U.S. airstrike targeted Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab Mosque in Aegina, in the province of Aleppo, Syria, while almost 300 people were gathering for the Isha night prayers. The Syrian Civil Defense, also known as the White Helmets, claimed to have recovered the bodies of 38 civilians. 5 of them were children. The U.S. Central Command claimed responsibility for the airstrike, stating, U.S. forces conducted an airstrike on an Al-Qaeda in Syria meeting on March 16, killing several terrorists, wrongly locating it in Idlib, Syria. The following day, the Pentagon released an image of the building after the strike, claiming it was a partially constructed community meeting hall, that dozens of core Al-Qaeda terrorists were killed, that they deliberately did not target the mosque at the left edge of the photo, and that initial assessments did not indicate civilian casualties. Our investigation seeks to establish what was the use of the building, were there civilian casualties, and how did the incident unfold in time and space. Using available and sourced imagery, videos, satellite photographs, and survivor testimonies, we began analyzing the building before and after the strike. We have identified 2 large craters in the north part of the building. Munitions experts confirmed they are consistent with 2 500-pound bombs. We obtained a video of the building recorded 2 months prior to its destruction. On the roof is the Adhan speaker used for the call to prayer, A sign next to the entrance reads, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab Mosque. We asked a local photographer to document the interior after the strike. The mosque's entrance sign is still by the door. Shelves for worshippers' shoes indicate it is a mosque, as do the rugs in the mihrab, where the imam leads the prayer, which clearly indicate that contrary to U.S. statements, the building is a large and fully functioning mosque. We interviewed and exchanged architectural plans with the building's original contractor and caretaker, who was also wounded in the strike. The upper floor, he said, contained the imam's flat. His wife was at home and was killed in the strike. The ground floor contained the main prayer hall in the south, as well as the ritual washing room, toilets, the kitchen, and the winter prayer hall in the north part. The strike took place just as a religious seminar in the winter prayer hall was finishing up. Some 40 to 50 people were still there. Others were gathering in the main prayer hall in preparation for the night prayer. A video taken during the construction of the building verifies witness testimonies regarding the layout and use of each room. There were no doors enclosing the winter prayer hall in the north, making it an unlikely place of an Al-Qaeda senior leader meeting. Two bombs hit the northern part of the building. A large number of people started to flee the building. As they evacuated, they were targeted by several missiles. An anonymous U.S. official confirmed the use of 4 Hellfire missiles. We interviewed the director of the White Helmets Rescue Operation, Mohammed Hadna. Halak described seeing 20 to 30 people scattered between the building and the road. Other witnesses confirmed this account. After the first strike, people went outside, and as they fled, they were struck in the streets. The plane was monitoring the place. It wanted to kill everyone who tried to get out. Those who immediately fled, people from surrounding areas who came to the rescue, they all got hit outside and torn into pieces. Many died in that strike. While sharing screens over Skype calls, Halak told us where they found victims within the rubble. 11 people were injured. They were found in these locations. 8 people inside the building died as a result of the 2 blasts. We know the location of 7. In this clip, Halak is seen pulling out 14-year-old Mohammed Arabi. He later died of his injury. We found and analyzed markings on the road that indicate the traces of Hellfire missiles, a distinct fragmentation pattern, and by remnants found nearby. This confirms witness testimonies regarding secondary strikes on evacuees.
So, just before we published this report, Human Rights Watch sent their report to US Central Panel. And they told Human Rights Watch that they acknowledged that the draft Human Rights Watch report could not have taken into classified information available to US authorities. This may explain why the US investigation reached a different conclusion. Well, a few weeks after we published our report, the US admitted that they had actually hit a mosque. They still claimed that it was filled by Al-Qaeda, but they did admit it was a mosque. They continued their investigation, and this investigation by the US Central Command was purely based on that they had killed one civilian in the airstrike, and everyone else. So this is just an example of some of the work that we do at OpenConCam. Thank you very much.
So we started a little bit late, but I think the talk was so powerful that I want to make questions if anyone wants to answer. They don't have a microphone, so if you could repeat the question.
Okay, sure.
Anyone have that?
Sorry, you got.
So there's an awful lot of demonstrating power in this kind of information and this kind of knowledge about against people. And you clearly work very with various different authorities to make sure that you have power in a responsible way. What are your internal guidelines regarding that? So there was some discussion about what you're describing as the Charlottesville rally to an extent kind of doxing, basically, but it's how you use that information, what your guidelines are.
So the guidelines of how we can decide how we use information. And it varies from case to case. I think one of the most difficult examples we have is during the conflict in Ukraine, we had been investigating basically whether or not Russian troops were inside Ukraine. So Russia was denying it, yet there was so many claims that this was the case. And there was one soldier who posted an immense amount of information about himself online, including photographs of himself inside Ukraine. Geolocate these, and we worked with a guy called Simon Ostrowski from Vice News who did a film called Selfie Soldiers on it. That was a tricky one because that individual soldier is not responsible for the policies of the Russian government, but he does represent them. So what Simon did is he basically, when we had gone through his social media profiles looking for more photographs in Russia and Ukraine, and Simon Ostrowski basically went to Russia and recreated these photographs. And then he went to Ukraine and recreated the photographs there. And then he went back to the guy's hometown and was able to track down where he lived and recreate photographs, and then challenged him about, why he was in Ukraine, which of course he denied, but we had clear evidence that he was there. It's very difficult in a situation like that where, we don't want to make one individual, the target of an investigation, but at the same time, he was the best representation of something that was a much, much larger issue. And we have these issues all the time. So, for example, we investigated the shooting out of MH17, the brigade that we believe the missile launcher came from. And we had to, thanks to the use of social media, basically document the entire unit, all the members, their ranks, where they were at certain times. There, when we published our report, we censored all the names and faces, but we did provide full information to the Joint Investigation Team. Of course, it's now how do we interact with law enforcement? That's become a really big issue now because law enforcement's interested in this. Organisations like the International Criminal Court will use this information. There's a new mechanism set up by the UN General Assembly of Syria that wants to use this kind of information. And when this involves so many things that are kind of crimes and life and death stuff, because we don't consider ourselves really a journalism organisation, although we do produce some stuff that can be considered journalism. We also don't want to be in a situation where people come to us as journalists and then we treat the information they give us as not a journalistic endeavour, if you see what I mean. But it's a debate we constantly have internally. Even today we're debating some particular information we've received and how we should go ahead at using it, even if we should. So it's a constant kind of conversation internally, and also talking to other organisations who work in kind of different spaces. You
yes. So a lot of your work seems to be based on a blended method. Technically, Google Maps Google satellite imagery is copyrighted to Google, so theoretically they could just withdraw access. So it's not quite open source in the way we would normally consider open, the open science community. Like, how would you? Are there any other sources that you could use, or how would you deal with a situation where Google tells me, if you have to pay more, you can't use our satellite imagery. You pay, money.
Yeah, so access to satellite imagery. Fortunately, Google have been generally really engaged with us and other people in the open source investigation community on this issue. So for the moment, they've been very good about it. In fact, 2015, on the anniversary of MH17, they put up a large amount of satellite imagery I'd asked them to put onto Google Earth from July 17th in Ukraine. And so they've been very helpful in the past. There's more questions about how this imagery is being used because more people are using it to do different things. So other sources are becoming available. There's a company called Planet Labs who have launched hundreds of microsatellites, and they're intended to take a image of the entire planet once a day, and then increasingly so. And they've actually managed to do that. The resolution is lower; it's 3 meters compared to 30 to 50 centimeters that Google Earth generally has. But it's still very useful for looking at environmental impacts. But it's constantly stuff that constantly changes. So like YouTube used to be kind of very keen on having these kind of groups in Syria posting videos online in 2011 and 2012, where it was all about the Arab Spring. Now things have taken a turn for a kind of the worse, and it's become a lot more dark with jihadi groups. Things have changed. So recently we've seen lots of videos from Syrian groups being deleted from YouTube. A lot of them not really because they shouldn't be deleted. It's there's been a lot of false positives. An example is this, like a channel that has 150,000 videos from Syria. They've been taken down 5 or 6 times now because they keep getting kind of 2 or 3 videos that are kind of black marks and the entire channel is removed. And many of these are the only copies of these videos from Syria. It's a historical record. And this is a really, really big issue at the moment and something we're working on. But you end up working with information that you're not actually in control of. And that kind of ties back to some of the work that we do with the ICC, where they're very concerned that all this information is being produced on social media that's really useful for investigations, and it can just be removed for apparently no reason sometimes. So it's something that, fortunately, the social media companies are aware of and they're willing to have a dialogue about, but it's still an issue that's being worked on. Or you were next?
Yeah, it's wondering, because one of the first statements that you mentioned, one of your missions amplify as well. And I'm just wondering, because I guess what you just showed us, I guess, is the question that many of us are asking for ourselves, like sort of call for justice, what happens next. And I understand that, I guess, your role as a journalist is something to look for justice and to do anything further. But I was just wondering, you mentioned that organizations such as UN or law enforcement organizations are interested in this data. And on the other hand, there has been a lot of discussion about UN and its activity, not ability to do something if, like, Russia is aboard and veto anything try to do. And I'm just wondering what happens. Is there any evidence to say like what you showed clearly and like it is before about like other parties' involvement in Syrian war and the crimes committed there? Is there any like real, effect of what you did to behaviors of countries, parties, organizations such as UN?
Okay, so changes to behavior. I mean, that's a massive question. I'll try and give some examples. So, for example, the example I gave you with Russian airstrikes, the Russian reaction was to reduce the number of videos they were posting, start using much more general terms, like saying terrorists instead of ISIS. Rather than talking about specific towns, they were talking about regions of Syria. So they changed their behavior based on what we were doing, but it's not in a good way. With the kind of law enforcement side and the International Criminal Court and organizations like that, that has been more of a case of them coming to realize that this stuff exists and there's a need to, or there's a desire to use this in their own work. And that's taking a long time, but it's happening and they're taking it very, very serious. Then raises questions of, okay, we've got Bellingcat collecting all these videos. Can they be archived in a way that's actually useful for the ICC? How do you know how to download a YouTube video properly in the views of the ICC? How do we archive that? Create an archive, how do you then make that accessible to other groups? Which groups do we choose to make that accessible? And this is something we're working on a lot at the moment because it's just one question after another with that. there has been, for example, within the British government, a lot of interest in the use of open source material to understand various topics, or even to kind of raise awareness, or do what they need to do with it. There's also some of the work we've done. I work with the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank in the US, and we did a project called Hiding in Plain Sight about the conflict in Ukraine. And this was at a time where lawmakers in Europe and the US genuinely didn't know if Russia was in Ukraine. Even though they have their intelligence services saying yes they are, a lot of them don't actually trust their own intelligence services anymore for various reasons. So they were basically saying, how do we know if this is true? And we could see lots of videos and photographs that we could say these are Russian vehicles that we can be certain are Russian vehicles in Ukraine. We can see cross-border artillery strikes from Russia into Ukraine. We could document all of this. So we did this report, and that actually changed minds among the public and policymakers. The Russian version of that report was downloaded in the first 10 days 1 million times, which for a think tank report is a miracle. So, and we had the Selfie Soldiers video that came from that from Vice News that had over 1 million views on it. It won a various journalism awards for that. So you can do stuff that's very effective, and that is kind of part of the whole amplify thing that we're doing.
Can I ask a follow-up question? No, because we're way over time. I'm really sorry, but it's super fascinating. But will you be able to stick around for a glass of wine?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
Okay, yeah, I'm so sorry. We started later, so but could we say thank you?